Verses 9 to 16. Happy in their peculiarity, and distinction from the rest of the nations, from the top of the rock I see him. v9. And it seems to have been a great surprise to him that whereas, it is probable, they were represented to him as a rude and disorderly rabble, that infested the countries round about in rambling parties, he was them a regular incorporated camp, in which appeared all the marks of discipline and good order. He saw them a people dwelling alone, and foresaw they would continue so, and their singularity would be their unspeakable honor. Persons of quality we call person of distinction. This was Israel's praise, though their enemies turned it to their reproach, that they differed from all the neighboring nations, not only in their religion and sacred rites, but in their diet and dress and common usages, as a people called out of the world, and not to be conformed to it. They never lost their reputation till they mingled among the heathen. PS 106:35. Note, it is the duty and honor of those that are dedicated to God to be separated from the world, and not to walk according to the course and custom of it. Those who make conscience of peculiar duties may take the comfort of peculiar privileges, which it is probable Balaam has an eye to hear. God's Israel shall not stand upon a level with other nations, but be dignified above them all, as a people near to God, and set apart for him. Happy in their numbers, not so few and despicable as they were represented to him, but an innumerable company, which made them both honorable and formidable. v10. Who can count the dust of Jacob? The number of the people was the thing that Balak was vexed at. Ch 22:3. Moab was afraid of them, because they were many, and God does here by Balaam promote that fear and vexation, foretelling their further increase. Balak would have him see the utmost part of the people. Ch 22:41, hoping the more he saw of them the more he would be exasperated against them, and throw about his curses with the more keenness and rage, but it proved quite contrary. Instead of being angry at their numbers, he admired them. The better acquainted we are with God's people the better opinion we have of them. He takes notice of the number, first, of the dust of Jacob, that is, the people of Jacob, concerning whom it was foretold that they should be as the dust for number. General 28:14. Thus he owns the fulfilling of the promise made to the fathers, and expects that it should be yet further accomplished. Perhaps it was part of David's fault in numbering the people that he offered to count the dust of Jacob, which God had said should be innumerable. Secondly, of the fourth part of Israel, alluding to the form of their camp, which was cast into 4 squadrons, under 4 standards. Note, God's Israel are a very great body, his spiritual Israel are so, and they will appear to be so when they shall all be gathered together unto him in the great day. Revelation 7:9. Happy in their end, let me die the death of the righteous Israelites, that are in covenant with God, and let my last end, or future state, be like theirs, or my recompense, namely, in the other world. Here, first, it is taken for granted that death is the end of all men, the righteous themselves must die, and it is good for us to think of this with application, as Balaam himself does here, speaking of his own death. Secondly, he goes upon the supposition of the soul's immortality, and a different state on the other side death, to which this is a noble testimony, and an evidence of its being anciently known and believed. For how could the death of the righteous be more desirable than the death of the wicked upon any other account than as it involved happiness in another world, since in the manner and circumstances of dying we see all things come alike to all. Thirdly, he pronounces the righteous truly blessed, not only while they live, but when they die, which makes their death not only more desirable than the death of others, but even more desirable than life itself, for in that sense his wish may be taken. Not only, when I do die, let me die the death of the righteous, but, I could even now be willing to die, on condition that I might die the death of the righteous, and reach my end this moment, provided it might be like his. Very near the place where Balaam now was, on one of the mountains of Moab, not long after this, Moses died, and to that perhaps God, who put this word into his mouth, designed it should have a reference, that by it Moses might be encouraged to go up and die such a death as Balaam himself wished to die. Fourthly, he shows his opinion of religion to be better than his resolution. There are many who desire to die the death of the righteous, but do not endeavor to live the life of the righteous. Gladly would they have their end like theirs, but not their way. They would be saints in heaven, but not saints on earth. This is the desire of the slothful, which kills him, because his hands refuse to labor. This of Balaam's is only a wish, not a prayer, and it is a vain wish, being only a wish for the end, without any care for the means. Thus far this blessing goes, even to death, and beyond it, as far as the last end. Now, we are told, how Balak fretted at it, v. 11. He pretended to honor the Lord with his sacrifices, and to wait for the answer God would send him, and yet, when it did not prove according to his mind, he forgot God, and flew into a great passion against Balaam, as if it had been purely his doing. What hast thou done unto me? How hast thou disappointed me? Sometimes God makes the enemies of his church a vexation one to another, while he that sits in heaven laughs at them, and the efforts of their impotent malice. How Balaam was forced to acquiesce in it. He submits because he cannot help it, and yet humors the thing with no small address, as if he had been peculiarly conscientious, answering Balak with the gravity of a prophet, Must I not take heed to speak that which the Lord has put in my mouth? v. 12. Thus a confession of God's overruling power is extorted from a wicked prophet, to the further confusion of a wicked prince. Preparation made the second time, as before, for the cursing of Israel. The place is changed, v. 13. Balak fancied that Balaam, having so full a prospect of the whole camp of Israel, from the top of the rocks, v. 9, was either so enamored with the beauty of it that he would not curse them, or so affrighted with the terror of it that he durst not, and therefore he would bring him to another place, from which he might see only some part of them, which would appear more despicable, and that part at least which would lie in view he hoped he might obtain leave to curse, and so by degrees he should get ground against them, intending, no doubt, if he had gained this point, to make his attack on that part of the camp of Israel which Balaam now had in his eye, and into which he was to throw the fireballs of his curses. See how restless and unwearied the church's enemies are in their malicious attempts to ruin it. They leave no stone unturned, no project untried, to compass it. Oh, that we were as full of contrivance and resolution in prosecuting good designs for the glory of God. The sacrifices are repeated, new altars are built, a bullock and a ram offered on every altar, and Balak attends his sacrifice as closely as ever, v. 14, 15. Were we thus earnest to obtain the blessing as Balak was to procure a curse, designedly upon Israel, but really upon himself and his people, we should not grudge the return both of the charge and of the labor of religious exercises. Balaam renews his attendance on God, and God meets him the second time, and puts another word into his mouth, not to reverse the former, but to ratify it, v. 16, 17. If God said not to Balaam, Seek in vain, much less will he say so to any of the seed of Jacob, who shall surely find him, not only as Balaam, their instructor and oracle, but their bountiful rewarder. When Balaam returned, Balak was impatient to know what message he had. What hath the Lord spoken? Are there any better tidings yet, any hopes of speeding? This should be our inquiry when we come to hear the word of God. See Jude 23:35.